All right, so that moves us on to our discussion agenda. Item 16, discussion of bond resolutions for the spring bond issuance as seen in Exhibit I.
Madam Chair, members of the board, and our community, we're going to bring our CFO, Ms. Madison Paul. We also have on call our bond attorney, Ms. Franny Hauser, and our financial advisor, Mr. Jay Glover. Ms. Paul?
Great. Thank you, Dr. Ross. And welcome, Franny and Jay. Thank you for joining us. So, as Dr. Ross said, Jay Glover is from PFM Financial Advisors, and he is our financial advisor here at the district. And then we also have Franny Heiser from Burr Foreman, who is our bond counsel. So I'm going to go over a few slides, and then I'm going to ask them to present as well. So first, I just wanted to go over really our timeline. So if y'all will recall, on March 13th, we had a bond finance workshop. And then tonight we have a discussion of the proposed bond resolution. We actually have 2 resolutions in your packet. We also want to talk about the capital projects that the maintenance bond will cover or will fund. And then we also will give a cost comparison of issuing through SCAGO or issuing from a standalone public bond sale. On April 24th, we will come back to you for approval of the bond resolution, and then depending on which route we go, the plan is to issue the bonds in May of 2023. So looking at the 2023 Series A, again, the current plan is to stay at 69.5 mils, which is our currently approved millage rate. Our 8% constitutional debt limit is a little bit over $47 million, almost $48 million. Our annual maintenance bond, which includes technology projects as well, is planned for $15 million. We're also planning to use our available resources through our 8% debt limit for the second tranche of Irmo High School East Wing. The estimate right now is about $10 million. And if you will recall, we did issue $34 million this time last year for the first phase of Irmo High School, so this will be the second phase, and we will come back next year for the third and final phase for Irmo High School East Wing. So the total one-year short-term bond issuance will be for $25 million. And next I'll invite Mr. Wiseman to come up and talk about the projects.
Good evening again. What I've looked at is what was the 5-year plan several years ago and tried to stay as true as possible to those additions. One of the few things that I was able to do, for example, is looking at the activity buses. You know, in some cases we may not need a new activity bus in a given year, so I want to be able to take that money and look at other vehicles, a replacement cycle for some of the other vehicles, making sure we have good GPSs on all of our vehicles. So just identifying some additional needs with that small part of money. Again, continuing on the district-wide security improvements. Instead of just talking about HVACs, we need to talk about the whole building, because sometimes we can replace an air conditioning unit and come to find out it's a problem with the thermostat inside the building itself. So we're trying to make sure that we cover all areas of HVAC systems. As you can see, we'll have the money set aside for the A&E for the start of the 5-year master plan. And having the ability, or having gone through with our staff and looking at the school needs, we have a better understanding of what they need. I think there's 92 projects that they have. A lot of it has to do with replacing carpet, those type of things. We're able to raise their monies up, or at least identify that money, and I honestly believe that I think I can do about 75 to 85% of their needs in the coming year. Again, we've added some additional money in that. We've got some money set aside for contingencies, and we've increased some of the money for technology so we can continue improving on our IT needs. Oh, I'm sorry.
So again, this will be for our what we call our annual maintenance projects. The remaining $10 million to get to the full $25 million will be just for Irmo High School East Wing. So next, I will ask Mr. Glover to come in to discuss the difference between SCAGO and a standalone bond issuance.
Perfect. Thanks, Superintendent Ross, school board members. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, thank you, Jay.
Great. So at our last meeting, we gave sort of a general overview of the standalone issuance process versus the district using SCAGO. And the reason this is a topic of discussion for this year's short-term financing is we intend to pay this back over 1 year, really with the total principal of $25 million being due March 1 of 2024. So SCAGO is an option for a financing with that maturity, whereas last year, where we paid back over a longer period of time, multiple years, SCAGO was not an option, so we did a standalone financing. You'll also recall that as part of the last meeting that we had as the debt workshop, it was asked to do a cost comparison of issuance through SCAGO versus the standalone financing. And in order to do that, we look back at prior cost of issuance for the school board standalone financings, as well as prior SCAGO financings, and did our best to estimate those fees based on essentially a $25 million financing that's being proposed here. As you can see, the total cost of issuance that we estimate for the standalone financing is about $96,000, which includes all the various professional fees and one rating, which we would likely do on a 1-year financing. And then you see the SCAGO cost of issuance is close to $70,000, which is about a $26,000 cost savings to go through SCAGO because you're sharing some economies of scale with other districts that are involved in the financing. I will point out that the one sort of outlier that does appear a little bit odd is the financial advisory fee. And really, with the SCAGO issuance, you would be paying for the services of PFM to assist with getting to this process so far. But then SCAGO has their financial advisor that would take you sort of post-approval through the issuance and closing process. So that's one fee I wanted to outline. So that's really the most transparent aspect of cost when we compare the two options. The other element of cost is the potential interest rate that the district might get through a standalone financing versus a SCAGO financing. There's some thought in the marketplace that a larger financing such as SCAGO could come at a lower interest rate. That's much harder to quantify because the markets are volatile and on a day-to-day basis, interest rates change. I will tell you that the standalone financing in the par amount of $25 million is of sufficient size to get competitive bids and multiple competitive bids. It would be a little more concerning if it was a much smaller financing, maybe $3, $4, or $5 million, that it might get lost in the shuffle of the bidding process, and thus the larger financing would come with it a better interest rate. I will cite a recent deal that we served as financial advisor on for Richland One schools that actually just did a competitive sale last week for a very similar type. Theirs was $22 million, and it again had a 1-year final maturity, and they actually got 5 bids during their competitive bid process. So that just gives you a real live example of what a competitive standalone financing would get. So to me, the most transparent aspect of cost savings that can really be quantified with SCAGO is the cost of issuance. And really, in terms of the interest rate, I would say they're probably comparable. It's hard to say one way or another because, quite frankly, really pricing from 1 week to the next in this volatile market, rates can move up and down. But we would definitely get multiple competitive bids either route that the district decided to go. And obviously, I can address any questions you all might have about this analysis now, or we can save those for the end of the entire presentation.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me, Mr. Glover?
I can.
Can you kind of explain a little bit these financial advisor fees? Because it seems like we are paying 2 financial advisors for the same service, and it actually costs us $10,000 more for the SCAGO issuance, which is theoretically supposed to be more cost-effective for the district. So I'm trying to figure out the $20,000 SCAGO financial advisor fee and then the $15,000 PFM financial advisor fee and how that compares to that $25,000 fee if we went to the market. Can you kind of explain that a little bit to me?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and that's the one reason I did highlight it to bring your attention because it does look a little bit odd. So, with the standalone financing, the $25,000 fee, that really involves the work that PFM, that myself does, working with your staff, really from day one through the process we're going through now, through the pricing of the bonds, and then through the closing of the bonds. So, we would be the only firm serving as financial advisor in the standalone financing, much like we did on your financing last year and the year before that. It's a little bit different with SCAGO because you really have two parts to the process. You have the part leading up to the approval that we're going to seek at your next meeting, where PFM is involved in this type of meeting, the process of running the numbers in our model to make sure this fits within your millage limit and sizing the financing. And then once you have approval, SCAGO has their own financial advisor that is involved in the actual pricing of the bonds and the closing of the bonds on SCAGO's behalf. So they have a separate fee based on their contract for that amount. I don't know, that fee maybe is negotiable. I don't know that per se, but that's really the one fee that is a little bit different in terms of how the process works, in terms of having a financial advisor. Whereas, with legal counsel, it's really the same firm involved, either way you might go. So that I hope that addresses your question. I know it does seem a little bit odd, but that's really because there's two different parties serving two different roles. And quite frankly, contractually, we have minimum fees within our contract. Not to say that PFM can't, work that fee down some if requested by the district. We want to be flexible and really meet your needs. So this, again, is just estimates based on where we are today, and these will be refined as we move forward.
Ms. Huddle?
So I just want to make sure I understand what we're dealing with here. So the difference between the cost of issuance between the two methods is $26,225, if I did my math correctly. But in the bigger picture, interest is the major cost. I mean, when you're paying interest on $25 million, that's going to be a lot bigger number than either one of these. So I just want to ask Mr. Glover again, are you saying you don't think there will be, I guess I have a two-part question. You don't think there will be a difference in interest between the two methods is my first question. My second question is, do we have to pick the method before we know the interest rate, or can we wait to pick the method once we know the interest rate so we know we're getting the best deal?
Yeah, no, those are both good questions. So to hit the first one, let me hit the second one first. Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to approve one route or the other sort of upfront, and then you would implement that financing because it is two very much different processes. And we don't know the interest rates till we actually get into the market and actually accept the bids via one method or the other. So you really do have to make a decision, not necessarily today, but at your next meeting when you consider a resolution, you'll either have to approve a standalone financing or a SCAGO financing. So I wish there was a way to do both and kind of take the lowest interest rate, but there's really a mechanism to do that, unfortunately. As for the sort of interest rate under each scenario, and that very much is what's going to drive the cost of a $25 million financing one way or another. In my professional opinion, it's hard to say that there's a benefit in interest rate going SCAGO versus a standalone financing of this size for the district being $25 million, because that is a large enough deal to get plenty of attention from bidders, and I think get multiple competitive bids in the process. And I think, again, Richland 1 just went through a similar standalone financing and got 5 competitive bids, which is a good number of bids in what I'll say is a very volatile market that we're in today. So to me, if you're looking at quantifiable cost differences, the only one that I could say with certainty is the cost of issuance saving associated with a SCAGO. And I would assume, based on my professional opinion, that the actual interest rate between the two scenarios is going to be very comparable.
Mr. Hogan, did you have a question?
Yeah, Mr. Glover, with SCAGO and they consolidate all the bond needs for everybody participating, does everybody receive the same rate, or is it allocated based on how much we're putting in through SCAGO?
Yeah, in terms of the interest rate, everybody receives the same rate. So from the bidder's perspective, it's essentially a combined financing of X par amount. And it depends on the par amount, depends on actually who all is involved in the borrowing. But from a bidder's perspective, they're not bidding on different tranches for different borrowers. It's one financing of a larger par amount, and everybody receives that same interest rate. Because again, all the bonds are going to mature on that March 1 of 2024 date.
Does that answer your question? Mr. Scully?
Yeah, and just to, Mr. Glover, to your point about the interest, it's not necessarily that we can know the actual interest rate to say which one's lower, but really, it's fair to say that the interest expense overall is going to be lower typically with the SCAGO issuance for one, because it's a one-year term, and if we did the standalone issuance, you're not predicting that on a one-year term, you're estimating that over, what, did you say, I think Ms. Heiser said up to 10 years on that one? I can't remember exactly, but if it's a longer term, the
Clarify
actual
that,
interest
while
expense
the
is going
standalone financing can be structured over a longer repayment term, we're comparing both of these options on a one-year final maturity of March 1 of 2020.
So they both are on a one-year
So
term.
they are going to both, you're going to be paying interest on $25 million regardless of if you go through SCAGO or you go through standalone. Actually, you'll be paying interest on $26,000 less of par amount through SCAGO, but in all intents and purposes, it is an apples-to-apples comparison in terms of the interest amount you pay being the same.
Okay. And then with the SCAGO, we do have the benefit of really the pooling impact of having that money. So you're coming from a pool, so the interest, they have that kind of additional leveraging power to potentially get a lower rate there. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's virtually impossible for me to say with certainty one stance is going to have a better or interest rate, because quite frankly, if both of these types of financing priced on different days, you could actually get a better bid potentially from one of them, but the overall interest rate could be lower because maybe in the week between the two deals pricing rates went up or down, 20 basis points. I hope that makes sense, that, you're very rarely going to get an instance where, a issuer does a standalone financing and a SCAGO financing on the exact same day, so you could get a perfect comparison of where those interest rates might come in, if that makes sense. And I know I saw Franny raise her hand as well, so I don't know if she had something to comment on.
If it's appropriate, I just wanted to point out one difference between the two methodologies that we haven't talked about yet. And that is the need to produce a preliminary official statement and a final official statement. In the standalone model, the school district, we would work with the school district to prepare that offering document. And that's one reason why the bond counsel fees are different between the two transactions, the necessity for the preliminary official statement. So the SCAGO transaction will have its own preliminary official statement, but there is limited information included in that document about each of the participants. So your finance department's not going to have to produce all the info that they would for a standalone official statement. And over the years, the history of Lectrix 5 is that maybe for at least 7 or 8 years, the annual borrowing was through SCAGO. Then this last year, you needed a multi-year borrowing, so SCAGO didn't fit. So this might be new for board members, but participation in SCAGO is certainly not new to the school district. And I'm happy to answer, any questions y'all might have on the legal aspect of it. I think Jay has very appropriately described the cost differentials and the interest rates.
And I think what Franny's getting at is there is a time element to one versus the other in terms of your staff, which is again hard to quantify from a dollar perspective, but obviously there is that element as well.
Ms. Huddle?
Just to follow up on that, because really that is the net difference, really. There's $28,000 difference in the bond disclosure council fee. So I guess, is that fee being paid, Ms. Heiser, to your firm regardless, or are these two different firms?
No, we are bond counsel for SCAGO, so we would be paid as the $20,000. The standalone, we're bond counsel to in SCAGO, we are both bond counsel for you, the school district, and SCAGO. In the standalone, obviously SCAGO would not be involved.
So I guess I may not have phrased my question correctly. So your firm would be receiving the $48,650 if we went that way. Your firm would be receiving the $20,000 if we went that way, the SCAGO way.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So can you, I guess, that's a big difference. Can you explain again why that's so different depending on which direction we go?
Sure. The preparation of the offering document, the preliminary official statement, and then the final official statement is a time-intensive process. And so the bond disclosure council fee is more because it takes more time to produce that document. In the SCAGO transaction, the preliminary official statement is easier to prepare because it does not go into as much detail for each of the school districts participating. And so it's a easier document to produce. Also, part of the SCAGO model, if you will, is that all the documents are the same. You know, we've got the economy of scale, we've got efficiencies, and so the time factor is less with a SCAGO issuance. And then the final difference is that the decision has been made by the SCAGO board that in order to make SCAGO more valuable to larger issuers, that capping the two major fees, council fee and financial advisor fee, is an advantage to the school district. So it's a combination of significantly different time inputs and the theory and practice behind the SCAGO model of efficiency and repetition.
And keep in mind, just to supplement that $20,000 fee that Richland Lexington would be paying, obviously other issuers would be paying similar fees. So, I mean, that's really where the economy of scale comes in versus, one issuer paying the full freight of that, bond counsel fee on a standalone financing.
All right. Do we want to move forward? Or you have
One last
I was about to
question.
say, they
Sorry.
still have a discussion about all of it. So.
This will shorten our time next time. So last question. It says estimate on both columns. So A, why is it estimate? And B, how much of an estimate is it? How far off are we, or could we be?
Yeah, and we always caveat estimate just because these numbers are preliminary. Ratings fees change based on par amount and that sort of thing. These are within, a couple of $1,000s of each other. This is not some, just generalization. I mean, these are fairly firm numbers, but I don't want to come back and, SCAGO is 71 and, standalone is 97. And then we start, questioning what the difference was. But, these fees are very close to where the final fee will be.
All right, so do we want to start the discussion of the spring bond resolution?
Thank
I see
you.
that's the next slide, so.
Yes, thank you. And really at this point, I'll just turn it really over to Franny. So as part of your packet, we did include both resolutions. So the very first one is a resolution if we did go through SCAGO. And then the second resolution, it would be if we did a standalone issuance. So I will turn it over to Franny for this piece as well.
Thank you. The SCAGO resolution has all the requirements in it for the school board to authorize the issuance of its not to exceed $25 million bond. There are then additional provisions that approve the participation in SCAGO. It talks about the trust agreement that SCAGO uses to put the debt into the marketplace. The form of the notice of sale is materially the same as a standalone. Deposit use of proceeds is the same. All the money goes to your county treasurer. The security is the same as full faith and credit. We provide the county auditor and treasurers with the notices to levy and collect. And there's a form of the bond attached as Exhibit A. And as I mentioned earlier, these are the documents that we have now worked through really for about the last 15 or 16 years. And so the standard forms really haven't changed. Regions Bank is the trustee for the SCAGO program. And so they would be the registrar paying agent. For your standalone, we have not named a registrar paying agent because we would either bid that out. I think US Bank was the last registrar paying agent, so we could use those. The standalone bond issue has all the things in it needed to issue that debt. It delegates to your superintendent the authority to choose the exact amount, something equal to or less than the 25 million, and the security, as I say, this is the same. So really the both documents do the same, get you to the same place. It's just a question of which road y'all want to take to get there.
Franny, do you mind also touching on the reimbursement resolution language in both documents?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for mentioning that. We include reimbursement language in our resolutions because it allows the school district to spend funds on hand, general fund monies, reserves, so that if you begin projects and you ultimately want to be reimbursed from the borrowed bond proceeds, the reimbursement resolution meets the requirements for the IRS. So we always work that flexibility in so that there'd be no question about reimbursing if funds are advanced.
Thank you. And just for y'all's information, the only really item that we would think we may need this for is the A&E firm for the 5-year master plan, since we already have them on board. They are part of the 2023 annual maintenance allocation. And so we may end up having some invoices that we would pay before we issue the bonds in May. So that would really, out of these projects, probably be the only item that we would use that reimbursement for.
There's a 60-day look back. So if you adopt the resolution and meeting in, I guess, April, you can look back 60 days from that date. So anything that's been spent before within 60 days of the reimbursement resolution, and then after the adoption would be able to be reimbursed under IRS rules.
Do we have any questions at this point? All right, I don't see any.
All right. So this was just for discussion tonight, so we don't need any action, but we will bring this back at the April 24th meeting, and that will be for action and final approval in April.
Okay.
On April.
And Madison,
in terms of the schedule, if I could mention that if the district wants to participate in SCAGO, the resolution has to be adopted on the 24th because the debt will be sold very shortly thereafter. If you choose to do the standalone, then there would be more time that you would have. But the deadline for participation in SCAGO is going to be the 24th of April.
Madison, my question is, does the district have a recommendation on which option they believe would be better for us to adopt at the next meeting?
So we have looked at both options, and as she said, the district prior to my time has used SCAGO before. They also have issued standalone. They've issued, they've done a private placement with the bank. So we have really done all of these options that we've talked about today. Based on what I have heard from Franny, what I've, talking to Jay, from a cost standpoint, I think that is, in here, that seems clear. But the other kind of non-quantifiable option or discussion would be that the official statement piece. So that is a significant, would be a significant impact to the finance department. As we are wrapping up budget season and we're trying to really put our focus into the 2024 budget, it could potentially be a time constraint to get the official statement done on our own. And again, that would be just because of all the extra information that you have to put into a standalone issuance that you would not have to put into the SCAGO issuance. So from an administration standpoint, just due to timing and the cost savings, we would recommend the SCAGO option.
Okay, and just for clarity for everyone, because if we're going to bring this for a final vote at the next meeting, if there are questions that anyone has, I know we have a lot of new board members. We have 4 new board members and existing ones. If there's questions that we have relating to this before we come in, how much time do you need to have those questions? I mean, I would think that you would prefer to know those questions before we come into our meeting so that everybody's prepared.
Yes,
I'm just thinking
absolutely.
that might help. What does that look like? I'm just curious for if I have additional questions or anybody else.
So the next meeting is April 24th, so it's, right at a month away. We are closed for spring break, so the sooner rather than later, we would appreciate those questions to come to us, but we will always try to give a quick turnaround, so I don't know that I have a deadline or a timeline.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I know that there's always deadlines when it comes to these things, so I just wanted to make sure that we give you enough time if we have any additional questions.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Mr. Scully?
I'm just going to recap. I think you just asked the question I was thinking of. So on the April 24th meeting, the intent is not for the board necessarily to decide between the 2 options. You're going to present a recommendation of one for approval, or are you actually wanting us to choose between the 2?
Ultimately, it is your decision. So if y'all, I don't know that y'all have you're leaning one way or the other right now, but we could certainly bring both, and then we could only make a motion on one, or y'all would only make a motion.
I think the
We'll bring the recommendation of SCAGO.
That's
that's
what I was
going to be the
hoping for.
recommendation, but, we have the ultimate authority
right.
to vote.
One of the things
The
going
lower.
to that first question, if, Madam Chair, if we could have those questions in before the 19th of April. Because
board packet?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And Mr. Hogan,
Can I ask Mr. Glover another question?
you absolutely may.
Mr. Glover, with SCAGO and when they, determine their interest, is the financial stability of each district that's applying for the SCAGO taken into consideration, or is it another kind of law of scale where they just look at the amount of money given versus the due diligence that was put in to bring the bond? Let me rephrase that. Could a school with a negative impact from their financial standpoint hurt the interest rate of SCAGO for District 5?
I couldn't hear that question.
Yeah, I couldn't hear it either.
Do you want me to repeat?
Please.
Okay, so what Mr. Hogan is asking, if there are districts that participate in SCAGO and may have a negative outlook or may have a lower, rating than we would get on a standalone basis, would that affect us if we go through SCAGO?
No, because of the state law that basically prevents a school district from defaulting on its debt, we call it the statutory intercept program. The Moody's will give this rating a MIG-1. That is the highest short-term rating, and that would also be the rating I think that you would get from a standalone. And so the rating will be basically identical.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, you're going to have the highest short-term rating based on that state intercept program. So there's not going to be the ability for one very low-rated credit that might participate to drag it on your pricing. So that will not impact. That's a great question. I probably could have addressed early on. So
All right.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Ms. Paul. Thank you, Mr. Glover and Ms. Heiser.
thank you.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
All right. Madam Chair, members of the board, we will move on to a discussion of our strategic plan amendments. And I'm going to ask Director of Accountability, Dr. Van Holden, to present these.
Thank you, Dr. Ross, and members of the board. Tonight, we're going to be looking at a couple different pieces of our strategic plan. I'm going to actually back us up and give us a review of what the strategic planning requirements are, as I know we have several new board members since the last time we discussed strategic plans. We'll then be talking about the results of our needs assessment and goal-setting processes, the strategy writing process, the action steps and implementation process, and the annual revisions to the plan. So going back a little bit here, first, strategic plans are required by law. Here you can see an excerpt from the South Carolina Department of Education website where it outlines our requirements under the law as it relates to strategic planning, and specifically when the due date for the plans is. You can see the plans are due April 30th of every year and go into effect on July 1st of that year. So we're here tonight to talk about the plan. Ultimately, we'll come back to you, similar to what Ms. Paul just outlined. We'll come back to you on April 24th for final approval and action on the plan as it exists. Strategic plans, beyond the overall requirement, there are specific sections and components that are required within a plan. We have to have sections on student achievement, school climate, teacher administrator quality, and in addition, we have a gifted and talented section. The gifted and talented section is required by a separate regulation. It has been tied to the strategic planning process since 2018. So you'll notice that our plan actually has 4 sections: school climate, student achievement, teacher administrator quality, and gifted and talented. We engaged in a comprehensive needs assessment going back to 2021. So we began the process of preparing for that needs assessment several months before that, pulling data, consulting with different departments on what data should be included. We then engaged with a team of stakeholders, to look at that data and engage in deciding what the strengths of the school district were, as well as identifying opportunities for improvement. Now, we engaged in that work in 2021 because our previous plan was ending during the 2021 school year, and we were preparing to launch our 22-23 through 26-27 strategic plan. Usually, that work is tied to our reaccreditation process, but our reaccreditation process won't occur until next year because of changes to our accrediting institution as well as their revision of their standards. So rather than wait on reaccreditation, we went ahead and began our needs assessment to begin our new 5-year process. So we didn't have to wait on that because the existing 5-year plan was up at that time anyway. So we brought together, as part of our needs assessment, we brought together 69 different members of our community. We brought together parents, staff members, teachers, administrators, community members to review that data. The committee members identified strengths, opportunities for improvement, looked at underlying causes, and drafted goals. We brought the drafted goals to the school board on June 14th, 2021, and we also outlined potential strategies that were recommended through the needs assessment process. So the goals were presented that night and approved, and then we also identified some preliminary strategies. Strategies are intended to be big, overarching ideas that will help us reach our goals. Over the next few slides, you'll see what those goals are. You can see that in school climate, we have perception goals. We look at the percentage of parents, students, and teachers who are satisfied with the social and physical environment. That measure comes from the South Carolina Department of Education school climate surveys. Those are administered every year, and actually we're in the middle of the administration window right now. That ends right before spring break. So if you're a parent of a current School District 5 student, we encourage you to complete that. We're also working with teachers and students to complete that survey as well. The teacher and student part actually counts for the school report card as well. Our student achievement goals, we have three, well, four if we count reading and math separately. We have a student achievement goal that relates to our MAP growth assessment, which Dr. Ross mentioned at the beginning as part of one of our formative assessment windows, which is currently open, and students are completing that. My children are taking it tomorrow, actually, for mathematics. But we use MAP growth in math and reading, and it's a growth goal. We then use graduation rates, for the secondary level, and we use college or career readiness as well at the secondary level. And there are some dates I need to update on there as well, so I apologize for that. Teacher administrator quality. You can see we have a teacher retention rate goal. We also have a goal on the percentage of teachers who are satisfied with the current working conditions and the percentage of teachers who agree they are satisfied with relevant professional development opportunities. And then finally, we have our gifted and talented goals, again with the dates that I need to correct there, but we've got another goal here, similar to the other goal in student achievement where we looked at MAP growth and the median conditional growth percentile. Here, though, that median conditional growth percentile is focused on students who began the year at the 90th percentile or above, that 90th percentile in achievement band and above, looking at the growth of our highest achieving students. We've got an advanced placement passage rate goal, and we've also got a goal to increase the opportunities of our students who are historically underserved in our gifted and talented programs, students who are coded as Black or African American, Hispanic or Latino, or two or more races, increasing the percentage of students from those groups who are participating in AGP, honors, AP, IB, or dual enrollment courses. Each school in our district, all 22 of the schools, as well as the Center for Advanced Technical Studies, have goals that are aligned to our overall district goals. The school level goals are a little different because they were set based on each school's individual baseline data. However, the goals are intended to be aligned to the district goals. So all schools have similar school social and physical environment goals. They've got the MAP growth or graduation rate and CCR goals. They've got the teacher retention rate goals, et cetera. Okay. After working on our goals, we then reconvened more stakeholder groups to look at strategies in School District 5. So we brought together the 36 parents, students at the request of the school board, which was a great addition to our teams, staff members, teachers, administrators, and community members to identify strategies that would help us reach those goals over the next 5 years. We examined the goals, we discussed the needs of our students, teachers, schools, and district, and we created a needs-informed list of strategies that would help us reach those goals. Those were approved in December of 2021. Each, I'm not going to read them all to you, but each area from school climate, student achievement, teacher administrator quality, and gifted and talented has a set of strategies aligned to it. They range from parent and family engagement and school safety in school climate to in student achievement. We've got subgroup focus for all students, but also for multilingual learners and students with disabilities, which were two groups that emerged from the needs assessment as needing additional focus at the district level. We've also got our adult education programs under student achievement. And teacher administrator quality, we've got strategies focused on recruitment, retention, alternatively certified teachers, as well as professional development. And for gifted and talented, we have a section that relates to outcomes in our gifted and talented programs, but also opportunities in our gifted and talented programs. The strategies, similar to the goals, the strategies at each school, so again, all 22 schools and the center, the strategies are aligned to the district strategies, okay? So each school has a strategy on meeting the needs of students with disabilities. Each school has a strategy on meeting the needs of our multilingual learners. From there, though, is when we start to see some differences because everybody then develops their action steps, which are the very specific things that are going to help us ultimately reach the goals and meet the needs of meet the needs of our students and our teachers and our schools. The way we did that at the district level was we actually broke it up because, as you saw, there's quite a few strategies in each section. So we have different folks who are responsible for each section. So in our school climate section, you can see a quick summary of each strategy as well as which district leaders are responsible for it. Student achievement has a similar breakdown, teacher administrator quality, and gifted and talented. So again, the intention here and the way we set it up for our current 5-year cycle is that we know which district administrator or administrators are leading a specific section. They're the folks who are responsible for developing the actions and the timelines and the costs, as well as how we monitor the success of those actions. They work through that piece. They actually, each of those team members has their own stakeholder committee they meet with throughout the year to talk about our progress in each of those areas. I'll also note, before I advance the slide there, that we aligned that to folks' job responsibilities and what they do. So, for example, you can see Officer Cato and Officer Wise there are over student safety. Mr. Knotts is over facilities. You can see Kelly Brown is involved in our anti-bullying strategy as well as our school-wide expectations. Of course, Mr. Giuliano, who's here tonight, also works with that one as well. Again, it's intended to be aligned to the work those folks are doing during the workday, so they oversee this specific component of the strategic plan as well. As I mentioned, each of those folks is working with a stakeholder committee composed of parents or guardians, staff, teachers, administrators, community members, and again, at the request of the school board, and one we think has been a great addition, we bring students into specific committees as well to get their input. The stakeholder committees review the strategy, the current action steps, and relevant data, and then based on that committee input, they recommend new action steps. They also recommend modifications to existing action steps, or in some cases, discontinuing an action step. I mentioned at the very beginning, we have an annual review process. That annual review process is always due to the state by April 30th, okay? So the document before you, which I think is 125 pages, is our full plan that we have been working on over the last couple years, and of course, it's intended to be our plan for next year, okay? We brought it for you tonight for discussion. Ties in nicely to what some of the stuff that Ms. Paul mentioned during the superintendent's report, though, because what will happen here is we'll submit the plan on April 30th. However, we know there will be revisions because the budget process is not finalized yet. So there will be some actions that we update over the summer, just like our schools will add things as new programs are or new grants are identified. There's always that continuous process. You'll notice there's always in the plan that you see before you, there's the little hyperlinks at the bottom. That's because it's a Google Doc. It's an active document that we're constantly updating and changing, okay? That's something we don't just pull out once a year. We are constantly looking at the strategic plan to make it as up-to-date and accurate as possible. And so when we bring it back to you, we'll be seeking that approval for the submission, but it won't be the end of our work for the 23-24 plan. That'll be something we continue to work on throughout the year and for the next 5 years. At this point, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Ross and the board for any questions you may have.
We stand for any questions at this time.
Any questions? Ms. Huddle?
In the attachment that we got that had percentiles and various charts, it went academic year 2015 to 16 and then 4 years, 2018, 19. And I know because of COVID, there were some adjustments to this, but so I guess my question is, do we not have 19, 20, 2021, 21, 22? We don't have any of those 3 years?
So I believe what you're referring to is the needs assessment section, which is where all those graphs are. So those are just the documents that we reviewed when we were setting the goals. So if you, we reviewed all those documents in 2021 in that spring, okay? So the intention there is just to show what data was used in the needs assessment process. So that was the 2021 school year. At that time, we didn't have data from the 2021 school year as it was not complete. In addition, we were missing, as you alluded to, much of the data from the 1920 school year because so much data was not collected that year because of the changes to the end of the year. So that is to answer your question about the needs assessment, but I think you have a follow-up to it.
Well, I guess a kind of follow-up question, and I don't know if this fits in here, but I mean, we've been reading a lot, more and more is being discovered about the COVID period and kids, and I guess I'm just wondering, is this so structured that we can't or don't need something specifically to address that? I mean, I, for one, wonder, how much did it affect all of our kids equally? Are our third graders struggling more than our juniors? How is that playing out, and what are we doing to address it?
So it's true that we do have the ability for annual reviews of the strategic plan, correct?
Yes.
And so one of the things that we're seeing, and I think we get as we look back at the data to come up with this strategic plan, we looked at 3 to 5 years going back to get this data. That gives us some good trend data on exactly, and more validity in terms of saying that this is the cause or this is the result of that when you look at a 3-5 year trend. We would hope now, looking last year was kind of the first year after COVID where we had kind of a good testing data. So we're now like at a 2-point trend to determine what those impacts are going to be. And I think we'll get a little bit more validity and clarity in next year's data to have that look back. But this strategic plan process does allow us to have that annual review where we're making our assessments. Right now, we're banking on that, looking at the data that Dr. Harris showed us, that a lot of it is we're still dealing with the social emotional issues. And so part of our pivot is looking at a district-wide social emotional learning program to deal with some of those issues we're seeing impacting on that spectrum. So to answer your question, we have that flexibility, but we gain in the strategic planning process longer trends to make this data. Now, post-COVID, we still need those trends, if that makes sense.
And I'll add one thing to that. That's one piece that our teams are supposed to be are looking at through our stakeholder input groups that we meet with throughout the year, is to look at those types of challenges. What are we currently seeing as the needs? Because ultimately we want to focus on our graduation rate and our college and career readiness and the academic growth of our students and the social and physical environment. So what is it going to take in this environment that we're in now, and with the needs of our students as they are now? How are we going to tailor our actions towards meeting those needs and building on those strengths, so ultimately we can reach those goals? That is part of this process for our teams, is continuously looking at what the real needs are right now with the data sources that we have and the information we have.
Any other questions? I see Mr. Scully, and then I see Mr. Satterfield. So I'm going to go Mr. Scully and...
Real quickly, when are the parent school climate surveys are still outstanding, correct? When is that due, and can you give us an update on where we stand as far as responses, and are we meeting our goal? Do we need to push people to?
So we don't know yet what the final results will be from the percentages standpoints in terms of what parents will say, mostly agreeing with specific assessments. I can say right now we've had about 500 more parents complete the survey already than we did last year.
Great.
I think last year we were at about 1,750 on the completion rate, which is pretty good. But this year we're over 2,000. I think when I checked earlier today, we were over 2,200. We're doing another push of the information again tomorrow to reach parents. Now, because it's anonymous, we don't know who's completed it and who hasn't. So we're going to push it back out to all parents again. So we're looking really good there. Monitoring the teacher and student one's a bit more challenging, but we monitor that one internally and have some tools that we're setting up for that process.
And when's that deadline?
It's right before spring break, so technically it goes through spring break, but it ends the last day of our spring break. So we're kind of internally saying it's the day before spring break because that's the last time we really have a chance to push information out to our parents, students, and teachers.
Great. So we encourage everybody to get those done.
Yes, sir. We generally find that having a higher response rate is obviously produces much more valid results, much more stable results, and helps us better understand our community. So
Absolutely.
We would greatly appreciate that.
Great.
Thank you.
I believe that would be April 6th, is that Thursday? But I don't know who's paying attention to that date. Mr. Satterfield.
First of all, do you work as an auctioneer as well?
So
You're awfully good at going through that stuff you know it by heart, I know. But
actually, if I don't do it fast enough, they're going to give me grief and tell me that I kept the board meeting going too long and they all want to go home. So it's a peer accountability issue. I tend to get grief about it.
Anyway, getting to my question, actually. I've noticed, and I've gone through this process before, and I know how tedious it can be in putting all the committees together and coming up with all your benchmarks and all that. One of the things that I have a great concern with it, and I've had a great concern with it for a long time, and I've sort of been looking through this thing, trying to find evidence of and I know you've already come up with your plan and everything. Is there anything in here that you could point me to that would, one of the issues that I learned in working with some of our schools of poverty is that a lot of parents, and I noticed, I looked in the gifted and talented section, you had some statements in there talking about, contacting parents and educating them better as to what services and all are provided and how to get involved. But I noticed that a lot of our parents in our not underperforming schools, they're actually overperforming schools, but that have a lot of our lower income families, is they don't understand the whole process, the whole educational process. And I know that a lot of times it's hard to get in touch with those folks because when you have meetings and stuff, they don't always show. But at the same time, is there anything in our strategy, our 5-year plan, where we're doing or make a concerted effort to reach out to those parents and help? Because I think a lot of those parents just truly don't understand how the whole process works. And sometimes they're intimidated by that. But I was just curious if you had anything in there. I was looking through it. I couldn't find anything. But is there anything you could steer me towards?
Yeah, great point. In the gifted and talented section, as you mentioned, that's one of the key areas we do look at, informing parents about the opportunities that are available, but also B, trying to help make sure we support students and families going through that. In addition, we have in our school climate section, we have a strategy on parent and family engagement. Now that looks different at every school, but one of the things we're looking at there, and one of the purposes of that strategy is determine how do we, or to better look at how do we partner and engage with our families? What does that look like? And that can vary a little bit. The beauty of how we have the plan set up is that we're looking at that from a district lens, but we're also asking schools to look at the context they have and the environment they have and work with our parent and family engagement leaders, Ms. Price and Ms. Felkel, and say, here's what we want to do within our school to better address the needs of our families, because it can look different in every school. It can look different in every community based on the unique needs of the parents and families that school serves. So each school has a piece on that, and of course we constantly look at that as a district as well. I will say that's a piece we're continuously looking at to try to figure out what do parents need from us and how do we meet that need. And it's one that can be especially challenging at the district level. We're looking at, as we've referred to multiple times tonight, 17,500 plus students, and each one of them is unique, each family is unique, and how do we better understand and address their needs? That's the intention of that strategy, and that's the intention of having each school work towards parent and family engagement as well.
I just know that over the years, I had a lot of conversations with parents, and invariably you get on the subject of scholarships and academics and programs and class rank and what's available. Yeah. And for some of those folks, it was like I was, spewing out something brand new that they'd never heard about. And I don't know, I just think it's a great goal to work towards and making sure. And we're having a lot more parents we have a lot more transient families. I know that as well. I know Mr. Ross and I have had that discussion before, but I just, again, it's something that I thought about over the years, and something that I noticed when I worked at one particular school that where parents just didn't seem to have the same, and I know that Mr. Ross was presenting at one time an app that would help provide more information, but I did notice that in your gifted and talented, that there was a concerted effort to reach out and engage those parents for school climate and emotion and all that, but academic is just another component in that too. So,
and one thing I should have stressed too is we have that school climate one with the parent family engagement. One piece we need to continue to look at too, like you just said, student achievement, but like our overall student achievement strategy, that very first one. What do we have built in there for school counseling services that we do provide? That's something that we can take a look at with our folks who lead that, Ms. McCaskill, Ms. Walters, and our Office of Academics and Administration, to ensure that work is represented or is being adjusted to better meet the needs of families throughout. Yeah, great point.
I think that is to a good point, Ms. Taylor, when we look at the selection process of the app, to see engagement data, to see who we're reaching, who we're not reaching, to be included in that.
All right, any more questions for Dr. Holden? Thank you very much for that very thorough presentation. All right, do I have a motion? Ms. Snipes, do I have a motion?
I move that we adjourn the board meeting at 9:12 p.m.
Do I have a second? Mr. Hogan, any discussion? All right, I'll call the question. All in favor? That motion carries 7-0. And we are adjourned. We will have our next meeting on April 24th. Have a great night.